东风，我是0号，航天员进舱后换衣检查正常。
东风明白。北京东风报告。
我是北京东风，请讲。
各号注意，我是东风，化验检查正常。北京。
北京明白。
酒泉。
明白。
Complex there, and these are live pictures coming from inside the return capsule where the 3 taikonauts have been seated waiting for liftoff. Liftoff is scheduled at 11:14 a.m. Beijing time, less than 1 hour, 30 minutes away. We'll be bringing you comprehensive coverage of the Shenzhou 17 mission, including, of course, the liftoff. The 3 taikonauts have now been seated in their seats in the return capsule. Last-minute preparation is being done before the liftoff. They're holding handbooks in their hands, checking off items that must be completed before the liftoff. I'm now joined in the studio by Professors Yang Yuguang and Liu Baocheng. Professor Yang, bring us up to speed on what we're watching right now. I mean, the ground staff obviously are still there. They have not evacuated the launch tower.
You can see that just now the ground staff is leaving the orbital module. So I believe the next step they will close the hatch of the orbital module, and then that's just on the same side of the payload fairing. There are also another hatch. They will also close it, and the sealing have very good sealing of that. So after that, the Shenzhou spaceship and the payload fairing of the Long March 2F rocket will be in the final status, and then the ground staff will leave the launch complex. This is also a very important security procedure to ensure that all ground staff, no exceptions, has already on the ground, and they will leave the launch complex with via ground vehicle. So only after that we can continue our countdown and to the final moment. At this moment, you can see just in this floor of the launch complex, we can see that most of these ground team are from the spaceship system to check if everything is okay. So the team from the astronaut system has already accomplished their tasks to help the astronauts to check their IVA spacesuits and to make sure everything is okay, and then they leave. So everything is in a normal preparation, and we can see that constantly we can also hear the voice from the commander and ensure that every system goes okay. It's go for launch. And with this video, we can see not only the launch complex, but also the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building, 2 kilometers away from the launch tower. But also, that we can. This is a video from I believe from UAV, manned air vehicle. Usually during the launch, we have multiple cameras and radar to monitor the status of especially the trajectory of the launch vehicle if it goes okay. So every system must work every system must work very normal status, and that as Mr. Zheng Yibing has already mentioned, the launch side system is also standing by at this moment, because that the rescue team belongs to the landing side system. And during the ascending phase of the launch vehicle, if anything wrong happened, they conducted an emergency escape, the rescue team will find our astronaut as soon as possible. But of course, on the other hand, our astronauts must have their ability to survive in wild field. So this is also very necessary. Still, you can see that, as you mentioned, on the right side is the camera. The video comes from the camera inside the re-entry capsule. All 3 astronauts already sit there, already fastened their safe belt. I believe that just several minutes before the launch, they will close the face masks of their helmet. And they will have the protection of their IV spacesuit for their, if any leakage happens to the cabin, they will have their IV spacesuit to protect them still in the pressurized environment. You know, as seen from the video on the left side of this video, you can see that the launch complex, the rotational platform is still, most of them are closed. Only the top one is open, and the emergency escape system, I believe, at this moment is already activated. So the next step, I think that at this moment, all the propellant tanks has already been filled with the UDMH, or unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrazine, as the fuel, and also NTO, nitrogen tetroxide, as the oxidizer. So all the, because this is a hypergolic propulsion system in room temperature, and all these propellants has already been filled to the launch vehicle very properly. And then also there are routinary checking and confirmation of everything, and then we go for launch.
I mean, thanks to the abundance of cameras, we were able to see the launch mission from different angles, including after the liftoff. We're going to be able to see the trajectory of the flight from cameras mounted onto the rocket.
Yes, there. You know, that's every time we have a camera mounted on the second stage, on the second stage of the rocket, looking backwards. So we can see that we can, from that camera, we can see 2 of the 4 boosters, and also we have cameras mounted inside this payload fairing to monitoring the status of the Shenzhou spaceship. And with this camera, we can see the separation between the second stage and the Shenzhou spaceship. If the only when the separation is conducted, we can see that this is a successful launch.
And Professor Liu, can I get your take on the impression of the lineup of the taikonauts this time? It's the same combination of 2 new astronauts and 1 veteran. In this case, Mr. Tang Hongbo is the veteran here. He set a record of the shortest interval between manned flights. His first flight was back in 2021 with the Shenzhou 12 mission. This is his second flight. Also, he'll be the first one to return to China's Tiangong space station. So he's a legend already. Let's just put it that way.
Yes. I think one shows that there's the successive passage of knowledge and skills by combining the previous batch of the astronaut as the leader with the young astronauts. And so this is really a strategic arrangement. And second, they are the youngest on the average age, so it shows that the Chinese astronauts are really there to be getting younger, and younger generations are getting more and more up to speed. And third is that the combination of their knowledge. They are not really doing very hefty scientific research in the station, but they have to have all the knowledge and sensitivity to observe and also collect all the information and keep a very clear, orderly record and for the research on the ground. And so this is something that's very much encouraging. And then, of course, their health conditions are really superbly drilled, very well prepared. And the past experience of the previous crews do also give not only their knowledge, but also more of the confidence in handling their own health and their living environment, and together with their professional activities that is there to be conducted.
Professors, stay with me here on our program. I'll be back with you in a short moment. The Tianwen-1 is China's first Mars mission, launched back in 2020. And CGTN's Yang Zhao explains how the orbiter completed its mission.
Mars has become a graveyard for robots. More than half of the 47 missions so far have ended in failures of various kinds. But we humans just love throwing robots at Mars. There have been 1 or 2 missions every couple of years for the past 2 decades. But this month alone, there have been 3 separate missions. Tiangong from China, Perseverance from the
北京
US,
景山报告。
and Hope from the
我是北
UAE.
京，景山请讲。
So what's going on out there?
景山报
Well,
告，测
the
量船
launch
当前
window
海
in
况
July
及
offers
2小
a
时准
great
备情况。
saving on
长江
fuel.
6号海况
Like
四
airlines,
级，
space
浪高
agencies want to
1.5
find
米，
the shortest
风力
route
四
to
级，
Mars.
能见度
But it's
15
not
公
when the
里。
two planets
景
are
山
at their
天
closest,
路
as you
长
might
江6
think.
号2小
Well,
时
the
准备
solar
完毕。
system is
景山
constantly
报告
shifting.
完毕。
Every
北
time
京明白。
Mars completes a single orbit, Earth goes around Sun
北京华
almost
山报告。
twice. That makes
我是
space
北京
travel far
华
more
山请讲。
complicated than a straight
华
line
山
on
2
Earth.
小时
Actually,
报
if
告
you launch when 2 planets
北京明白。
are at their closest distance, a point known as Mars opposition, your
我是北京
robot
江
may
阴请
never
讲。
get to Mars. Instead, scientists will patiently wait for a time when
北京
Mars
明白。
has a head start. Then they would not aim the spacecraft towards where the Mars is at a launch time, because by the time you get there, the Mars will have already moved right here. Instead, they need to point it somewhere ahead. And where Mars is going to be when
我
you
是北京
arrive.
长城请讲。
This orbit has been called the Hohmann Transfer Orbit, which was
Beijing.
first proposed in 1925. Everything needs to be calculated carefully because this launch window happens for just a few weeks
曙光请讲。
every 26 months. Now the window is open, and missing it means 2
Beijing
more
明白。
years of waiting. Well, transfer orbit will take Tianwen 7
Beijing.
months to
天光
travel
请讲。
hundreds of millions of kilometers. Choosing a shorter way would ironically
明白。
require more fuel. The best things about this orbit is that theoretically, the propulsion system just needs to kick in twice during the trip
我是北京银
to
河请
get
讲。
off Earth at the beginning and catch up Mars when it's the approachest,
北京明白。
and it should barely use fuel in between. When it's getting a bit more
我是北京
closer, at about
天光请讲。
400 kilometers away from Mars, it needs to slow down
北京
in
明白。
time so that it can be captured by the planet's gravity and become a satellite of it, or it may miss Mars forever.
And more than 1 hour remains until the Shenzhou 17 spacecraft's blast off, as the staff and the 3 taikonauts are making their final checkups. But for now, let's turn things over to my colleague Ho Na with a quick roundup of the latest world stories we're following for you this hour. Ho Na, what do you
Hello
have
there,
for us?
Zhongxi, and welcome to the world today. Now let's take a look at the news making headlines around the world.
各号注意，收集2小时准备情况。0号。
2小时准备完毕。
太原。
2小时准备完毕。
渭南。
2小时准备完毕。
青岛。
2小时准备完毕。
酒泉。
2小时准备完毕。
青山。
2小时准备完毕。
双城。
2小时准备完毕。
5号。
2小时准备完毕。
天仓。
2小时准备完毕。
Really the primary elements of learning how to live and work in outer space. It's wonderful to see that new focus from all these nations, from particularly some of the largest populations on Earth focused on space.
See, we have seen the growth of China in space sector is really tremendous. I think you are giving a lot of push to create the required infrastructure in terms of technology capability, in terms of building new systems and launching new missions. I think this shows your directions are very forward looking, and I am very appreciative of that part of the work that you are doing. And it is also goes with the long-term vision that you have created for the space sector.
Why not? This is also a possibility, but sending an astronaut is a possibility. But before that, we can give some experiments to be realized, to be done in Tiangong space station. And because in ISS we will hold 13 experiments, our astronauts, but that's not all. We have many more. So when we find the opportunity, why not? We can also do it in together with CNSA in the space station.
Three taconauts embark on a new journey to China's space station aboard Shenzhou 17.
20 years after the first Chinese man took a historic step.
China aims to rapidly advance its capabilities into space.
Join us on CGTN for China's flight mission to explore the space and beyond.
各号注意，我是北京，1小时准备。东风。
东风明白。
华山。
华山明白。
江阴。景山。
各号注意。
景山明白。
1小时准备。
长城。
0号。
明白。
天
太原、
宫、
明白。
渭南、
明白。
青岛、
曙光、
明白。
酒泉、
银河、
明白。
青山、
明白。
双城、
明白。
5号、
明白。
天仓、
明白。
各号注意，我是东风。第2次综合检查，5分钟准备。景山、
景山明白。
华山、
华山明白。
08号、
明白。
太原、
明白。
渭南、
明白。
青岛、
明白。
酒泉、
明白。
青山、
明白。
双城、
明白。
5号、
明白。
东风，我是华山。
我是东风，华山请讲。
华山第2次综合检查，5分钟准备完毕。
东风明白。
东风，我是景山。
我是东风，景山请讲。
景山、江阴、天路及长江6号第2次综合检查，5分钟准备完毕。
东风明白。各号注意，收集5分钟准备情况。08号。
5分钟准备完毕。
太原。
5分钟准备完毕。
渭南。
5分钟准备完毕。
青岛。
5分钟准备完毕。
酒泉。
5分钟准备完毕。
青山。
5分钟准备完毕。
双城。
5分钟准备完毕。
5号。
5分钟准备完毕。
各号注意，我是东风。第2次综合检查 1分钟准备。50秒。40秒。30秒。20秒。10、9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，起飞。T0，幺洞10、19分。
SOMAT presenta...
¿Programa eco así de sucio?
¿Y qué importa? SOMAT Excellence 4 en 1, diseñado para una limpieza excelente incluso a bajas temperaturas. Cambia el programa Eco y ahorra hasta un 20% de energía.
Got to be, creado para ti. Frescor instantáneo sin importar las prisas. Para looks arreglados sin importar el caos. Para volumen al instante sin importar el ruido. Got to be, for whoever you want to be.
各号注意，我是东风。各号停，收集第2次综合检查情况。景山。
景山明白。
华山。
华山明白。
08号。
第2次综合检查正常。
太原。
第2次综合检查正常。
渭南。
第2次综合检查正常。
青岛。
第2次综合检查正常。
酒泉。
第2次综合检查正常。
青山。
第2次综合检查正常。
双城。
第2次综合检查正常。
5号。
第2次综合检查正常。
东风，我是景山。
我是东风，景山请讲。
景山，江阴天路长江6号，第2次综合检查正常。
东风明白。
东风，我是华山。
我是东风，华山请讲。
华山第2次综合检查正常。
东风明白。
北京景山报告。
我是北京景山，请讲。
景山报告测量船当前海况及1小时准备情况。长江6号海况4级，浪高1.5米，风力4级，能见度15公里。景山、天路、长江6号1小时准备完毕。景山报告完毕。
北京明白。我是北京江阴，请讲。北京明白。
北京华山报告。
我是北京华山，请讲。
华山1小时准备完毕，报告完毕。
北京明白。我是北京曙光，请讲。北京明白。我是北京长城，请讲。北京明白。我是北京天宫，请讲。北京明白。我是北京银河，请讲。北京明白。我是北京天舟，请讲。北京明白。
各号注意，收集1小时准备情况，0号。
1小时准备完毕。
太原。
1小时准备完毕。
渭南。
1小时准备完毕。
青岛。
1小时准备完毕。
酒泉。
1小时准备完毕。
青山。
1小时准备完毕。
双城。
1小时准备完毕。
5号。
Actually speaking,
1小时准备完毕。
it is now less than 1 hour.
1小时准备完毕。
To the launch, but you know that's the what. It mentioned the voice mentioned the 1 hour preparation is a portion that lasts for several minutes. So the Commander Zero must confirm that the 1 hour preparation has already been done for all these systems. There should be no exception and go for launch. And you see, as we already mentioned, that the rotational platforms will be opened one by one, because just before that we have to conduct all kinds of checking, and also, as you mentioned, the preparation work for the astronaut system and for this Shenzhou spaceship system. So the opening, the rotational platforms forms a closed volume and give a very good protection to the combination of the rocket and the Shenzhou spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the rocket. The Long March 2F rocket has proved to be a reliable one for the manned missions. How has the Long March series developed over the years to reach a reliable model that can be used consistently for China's current and future manned flights?
Well, this is very interesting. In the previous videos, we already mentioned about the commercial space activities. You see that this is also related to commercial space activity. You know that China entered the international commercial launch service market in 1980s, while the first commercial launch is in 1990, the launch of the Asia Satellite 1, which was built by Hughes Company in US, accuracy a Hughes 376 model. The satellite is called Asia Satellite 1 by the launch of the Long March 3 launch vehicle. But honestly speaking, at that moment, the capability of China's launch vehicle cannot meet the requirement of most satellites in the international market. So China developed another much more powerful launch vehicle called the Long March 2E, with 4 boosters added to the core stage. And with this Long March 2E, you know, that's the capability is 8.8 tons to low Earth orbit. So it's already big enough to launch a spaceship in orbit. So that made a good foundation for the Chinese manned space program. You know, also, you know that in 1990s, in the year 1992, with the establishment of the formally the setup of China's manned space program, we have another derivative of this Long March 2E, the Long March 2F. The Long March 2E and the Long March 2F both are 2.5 stage rockets. With the core stage have 2 stages, the first stage and second stage, and 4 boosters. But the difference is that we have a malfunction detection system on board the Long March 2F. So the reliability of the Long March 2F is much higher than the Long March 2E. It can reach to 0.97, which means that for 100 launches, only 3 of them may have some malfunction. But still, this, you know, that this is still not safe enough for astronauts. So we added another important system called the emergency escape system. So with this system, the safety to the astronauts can reach to 0.997. Which means that for 1,000 launches, only 3 of them will threaten the safety of the astronauts. So this is the difference between the Long March 2F and the Long March 2E. But both these 2 launch vehicles utilize what I have already mentioned, the hypergolic propulsion system, which use propellants with room temperature, which is more convenient for usage, but with low energy compared with the new generation. But it is already very practical with the UDMH and the NTO as the propellants. So the first stage have 4 engines, and the 4 boosters each have 1 engine. Each engine has a thrust of about 75 tons. So the total liftoff thrust is 600 tons, and the total mass of the liftoff mass of the launch vehicle is more than 500 tons. Okay, T-minus 30 minutes.
T-minus 30 minutes. We're 30 minutes away from the liftoff. I mean, Professor, you've been
Aquí queremos que tengas un plan de crecimiento personalizado, José. Para ello usamos una herramienta de Seguid. Desde el proceso de selección hasta tu formación, este sofisticado software.
Lo más difícil será pronunciar bien nuestro nombre. Se escribe Seguid. Se pronuncia Together Make More Possible.
Well, the capability of the Long March 2F has the lower capability than the Falcon 9. But the Long March 5B launch vehicle, the capability is greater than the Falcon 9. Currently used by the SpaceX. But you know that, of course, the Falcon 9 is a human-rated launch vehicle. It can launch the crewed Dragon spaceship. So from the view of human-rated launch vehicle, it is bigger and have greater capability than the Long March 2F launch vehicle. But you know, until now, the India do not have a human-rated launch vehicle because all their tests are unmanned. They will plan their first maiden flight of their future manned spaceship Gagayan maybe within this year or the next year. So they must conduct, as formally announced by my colleague in International Astronautical Federation, the chairman of the ISRO, Mr. Dr. Samanas. So they will first conduct maybe 3 to 4 manned flights of the Gagayan manned spaceship, and then conduct the first crewed mission. And in the future, they also have a plan to have their own space station and the human missions to the moon.
Is the Long March rocket series still developing, still evolving? What more functions, how much more reliability and capabilities can we expect to be developed along the Long March series?
Before answering this question, let's look at the video. We can see that this is also a camera. This is a video from a camera mounted on the rotational platforms. So you can see that the distance is increasing with the launch vehicle. And as I mentioned, you can see that in the yellow ones, you can see some small arms still attached to the launch vehicle because we still have pipes and the cables connected to the launch vehicle with these small arms. And so finally, all the platform will be opened. So let's continue our discussion. As you asked, yes, of course, although you know that Long March 2F is the only human-rated launch vehicle of China, but still we are now developing the new versions. You see that according to Mr. Zhang Hailian, the Deputy Chief Designer of China Manned Space Program, during the forum just in July this year, he introduced the detailed plan of China's human missions to the moon. And during this mission, the major role will comes from the Long March 10 launch vehicle. It is a heavy launch vehicle in China. The capability is 27 tons to the lunar transfer orbit. You know that, as we discussed, the most powerful launch vehicle of China is Long March 5. And the capability of Long March 5 is about 8.3 tons to lunar transfer orbit, which means that it can bring an object about 8.3 tons to go to the moon. But you know, of course, it is not big enough to conducting manned missions to the moon. So in the future, we will have the Long March 10 launch vehicle, which can bring our astronauts through the new generation manned spaceship to the translunar orbit for the moon missions. And you know, we will use 2 launches. One to launch the lunar lander, a manned lunar lander, but in an unmanned status to the circumlunar orbit, and it will wait there. And then the second launch will have our 3 crew members on board our new generation spaceships with the Long March 10 launch vehicle also to the lunar transfer orbit. And the 2 spacecraft, the new generation spaceship and the lunar lander, will rendezvous and dock in the lunar orbit and then conduct the landing on the moon.
In terms of the rendezvous and docking today, I mean, after 6.5 hours into the flight, the mission will conduct a fast automated rendezvous and docking with the front port of the Tiangong core module and forming a 3 spacecraft, 3 module assembly.
Exactly. You see, that's for any spacecraft, the launch to chasing and rendezvous docking with another spacecraft, especially in the low Earth orbit, the basic and the most important requirement that when the second spacecraft come into the orbit, it must be in the same orbital plane of the first one. So this is most important requirement, because you know that the low Earth orbit, the spacecraft in the low Earth orbit has a very high velocity, 7.8 kilometers per second. So even a very slight error in the orbital plane between the two vehicles may cause they will lose the chance for rendezvous and dock. So they must be in the same orbital plane. But on the other hand, you see that the orbital plane of the outstation is relatively stable in the universe. So we can only launch our Shenzhou spaceship when the launch site, the launch complex, rotating together with the Earth, when it rotated to the position just almost in the same orbital plane of the Tiangong space station. So that is the reason why we read this zero launch window. So it is very narrow and very strict. So this also raises a very high requirement to the reliability and robustness of our launch vehicle and the Shenzhou spaceship, because we must check everything. If anything wrong happened, we must stop the procedure, and maybe the launch window today will be abandoned. So we will list at least 1 day. And as you mentioned, today we choose the fast rendezvous and docking. It raises an even higher requirement to the launch itself, because not only it requires the two spacecraft to be enter the same orbital plane, but also their position in this orbital plane have some requirement to meet the requirement for the fast rendezvous. For 6.5 hours. Usually, you know that for this kind of mission in 2011, we used 2 days. So this is also an even more strict requirement. And you know that our Tiangong spaceship also make a world record to using less than 2 hours from launch to rendezvous and dock with the Tiangong space station. But for the manned spaceship, we keep a good balance between the how fast it is and how reliable it is. So 6 hours is already very, very comfortable for astronauts. You may experience that every day you you drive your car. Of course, you stay as short as possible in your car between the transfer, because it is too narrow in the car. Of course, if you stay in the room, it will be much more comfortable. You can recognize our Shenzhou space station as a room. And the Shenzhou spaceship as a car. So with shorter period stay in the Shenzhou spaceship, they'll be more comfortable.
Absolutely. It's a remarkable commute to an office room, to a living quarters, whichever way you put it. And if you're watching our special program today on CGTN, through CGTN live streaming on our social media platforms, we value your feedback also. Feel free to leave your questions. We'll put some of these questions to my guests here in the studio, Professor Yang Yiguang and Professor Liu Baocheng. They will be more than happy to take your questions, and we encourage you to do that as you stay with us on our special coverage of the Shenzhou 17 mission. We are now about 21 minutes away from the liftoff. These light pictures from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center show a quiet, serene scene there at the launch complex. The rotating platforms have opened.
You can see at this moment, all the rotational platforms has already opened. I believe that at this moment, the ground team has already at least withdrawn from the service tower. And maybe not all withdrawn from the launch complex, but absolutely they will already left the service tower. But as I mentioned, still at this moment, there are several small arms in brown color which still attached to the launch vehicle. To give electricity, the gases, and also the other supplies. Also, you know that there are air conditioners inside our payload fairing to give a very comfortable condition for our Shenzhou spaceship.
And the 3 taikonauts seem ready and relatively comfortable given the condition in their seats, holding handbooks.
Yeah, you may notice the packages between the luggage between the different astronauts. You know that there is a very interesting requirement. The position of the center of the mass of the re-entry capsule is very, very strict. This will influence, especially that during the re-entry, it will influence the safety of the astronaut and also the position where they can land. So this, that's the different people have a different weight. So even the slight difference between the weight of different astronauts must be considered.
And could they gain and lose weight during that 6 months? I mean, that's
that there is the standard criteria.
I mean, they measure. I assume they weigh themselves on a regular basis just to make sure health element, to make sure their health is in check. But what if they gain weight or lose some weight during that 6 months stay?
This is also part of the research. I think.
Exactly.
So because of biological research for human tolerance and human impact is also part of the research.
But of course, the most important is the upper limit. They should not exceed that.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think anybody has ever exceeded that limit, right?
Yeah.
Considering how regularly, how often they check their weight and their health status up there in the Tiangong space station.
And you can see the beautiful view of our Jiutian Satellite Launch Center. The forest in brown color at this very beautiful season.
And now as we await the launch of Shenzhou 17, let's once again check in with CGTN reporter Sun Ye, who joins us from the launch site. Sun Ye, we're minutes away from that 15-minute countdown, a crucial countdown to liftoff. What's the latest on the ground?
Well, the commander here hasn't called out that 50 minutes countdown yet, but this is the moment, the minus 15 minutes. Oh, he's calling it now. This is the command that he will be calling out the last cars, the last people near or under the launch tower to evacuate, and the last file of cars could be in our view to leave the launch tower. And as it gets near the launch hour, we've been talking to rocket designers, and they say even though they've seen it so many times, this hour it's still intense. And for us, we've been hearing 准备好了, we are ready, everything is normal, 正常 throughout the morning, and we've learned that all the system from rocket, spaceship, they are safe and reliable. This is still a moment quite intense for people who are working here, and we imagine it could be more so for the taikonauts. And we have one small trick from none other than Yang Liwei, the first taikonaut in space. He said to deal with that kind of anxiety, there was a small trick. He said you could try putting your tongue in your cheek like this, but probably don't show it. That would take the your focus off everything else and take the anxiety level down. But perhaps the taikonauts today, the Shenzhou 17 crew, they don't need that. Yesterday we heard Tang Hongbo, the commander, said he's very calm because he only has his mind on one thing, on getting the mission accomplished, and that's what we're here. We are here to witness now, to see them, to see the liftoff, and to see the mission gets accomplished. 庄石.
Well, just so you know, I did try out that trick just now when we were showing the pictures, and I was not on the screen. And I don't know, maybe it'll help. I mean, it's a trick from China's first taikonaut. I gotta try it. Thank you so much, Sun Ye, for that update. We appreciate it. And we continue our studio discussions here and conversations until the liftoff happens in just about a little over 15 minutes time. That liftoff scheduled at 11:14 a.m. Beijing time. Professor, can we talk about that window for liftoff? Because we've had a lot of manned and unmanned launches, and each liftoff time is very different. Some in the middle of the night, and today in morning, not exactly early morning. How is that window decided? I mean, what are the parameters and elements that need to be taken into consideration? Weather, for example, is one of them?
Weather is very important consideration, especially the speed of the wind will be considered either in the low altitude and in the high altitude. Moreover, you see that you already mentioned about the launch window in different time is quite different. Some in the night, some in the morning. This is because you know that the change of the orbital plane of the Tiangong space station is relatively slow comparing with the Earth, but still it's changing. So every time it's in a different position. And we've already mentioned that the basic requirement is that after the launch of the Shenzhou spaceship, it must be in the same orbital plane of the Tiangong space station. So in different seasons.
我是0号，15分钟准备。
Okay, T minus 15 minutes and counting.
Yeah, this is really to synchronize the universe in which the space shuttle is placed in order to synchronize everything that is precisely to be made sure get connected.
I mean, just at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, we have the collaboration of 3 systems: the astronauts, the space craft, and the other one being the launch vehicle systems. They have to cooperate and collaborate closely, and then we have the Beijing Aerospace Control Center. We have the ground stations, the monitoring stations, the monitoring ships. You have to coordinate between all of these systems to make sure that everyone is on board, everyone is on the same page for the liftoff. And that is how all of these real-time coordination happens, why this real-time coordination happens.
And you can see from this video, the previous video is come from unmanned air vehicle and UAV near the launch complex. So today, the UAV is widely used to monitor the whole situation. So it's very convenient for usage.
But don't they pose risks to the launch? I mean, they they're of course very low altitude.
Yeah.
But then they're around.
And also, it's far from the trajectory of the launch vehicle.
Okay.
So you can see that the ground team is retrieving from the launch complex.
So the last groups of ground staff, what remains of the ground staff right now?
The ground staff is just in previously work on the launch complex. So that's the person in charge will count if the number is correct. So if the number is not correct, then must be someone remained on the launch complex. So even in the most serious situation, they will stop the launch process.
Let's check out some of the comments left by our social media users. They've been watching our special coverage here on CGTN, and they, I believe, have some questions. And let's check out some of these questions. We have a lot of comments flooding in. I don't know if we have time to review all of them, but let's take a look at some of them. For example, what happens to the human body if someone spends 2 years in near zero gravity, like on the moon or Mars? Professor Yang?
Okay, this is a good question.
Nobody has ever attempted that. I mean, even with space stations, you rotate every few months.
That's the record today for a single flight in microgravity field is achieved by Mr. Polyakov, just passed away in recent years. But his record is 437 days in orbit. So this is the highest record made in the Mir space station. So also there are several crew have already conducted the residence in International Space Station for more than 1 year. Actually speaking, the human being has already conducted these kind of studies. Absolutely, the influence of microgravity and also together with the radiation have a remarkable influence to the people's health. Especially, that's
in what ways?
In many ways, that's the weakening of our neural system and our muscles, the loss of the bones, the loss of calcium, and also the psychological problems. All these are very serious problems. So we must have the certain countermeasure to dealing with these kind of negative influences.
And let's also take a look at this other one. How do the people breathe in the craft, in the spacecraft, and in the space station? How do they breathe? There's oxygen in the spacecraft and on the space station.
Usually, that in our space station we
各号
use
注意，我是0号，下面通报点火时间。点火时间为11时13分59秒。点火时间为11时
The commander they were announcing the final ignition time.
Set at 11:13:59 seconds. That's the precise time when the ignition will happen.
This is very interesting. That China adopted a quite different system from other countries. what we mentioned is the ignition time. And the other countries, for instance, US, use the liftoff time. So this is different. There is a several second interval between these. So you may always notice that Mr. Zhong Shi already hosted so many launch live coverage. You may heard the voice just after the liftoff, and one of the ground staff will report the actual liftoff time. Because you know that as the commander, the chief commander has already mentioned, they announced the ignition time, and there will be several seconds interval for the liftoff time. So another person will announce this liftoff time just after the launch. And for the question, you know that China adopted a mixed atmosphere on board our Tiangong space station, which means 20% of oxygen and 80% of nitrogen is quite similar, but very close to our ground. So the astronaut will be very convenient inside the station. But you know that in the EVA, it will be quite different. You know that the higher pressure is, the more rigid the spacesuit is. So if the difference between the inside and outside the EVA spacesuit is 1 atmosphere, it will be very, very rigid, and it will be impossible for the astronauts to move and change the shape of their bodies. So there is no exception that all space-capable nations choose the pure oxygen atmosphere inside their EVA spacesuit. So before that, we must have some adaptation procedure for the astronauts from their common daily life in our station to the EVA, because they will change from the mixed atmosphere to the pure oxygen atmosphere. And in the pure oxygen atmosphere, the inner pressure in the EVA spacesuit is only 30 to 40% of the common atmosphere. So for this change, we have a very critical procedure to remove all the nitrogen inside our body, because it will boiling if we change that very fast. That will be very, very dangerous.
And I guess we have time for a couple more. A viewer named Azul Celeste asks about the measures to deal with debris and pollution in the space. We covered this in our earlier discussions. I mean, there has been minor damage, very minor damage to the solar wings of the Tiangong space station. And part of the tasks for Shenzhou 17 is that they will inspect some of that damage, not exactly to the point where they have to repair or fix that, but they will definitely take a look. Yeah. But what happens if that damage is a little bit more extensive, let's say, in a hypothesis situation?
You know that in the orbit for the space debris, there are hundreds of millions debris with a size less than 1 centimeter. So for this kind of debris, it's very difficult to track for tracking because it's too small. So we use the shield to protect the space station. But for bigger ones, for instance, for those larger than 10 centimeter, usually if it collides with the station, that will be cause very serious damage. So for these bigger space debris, usually we will conduct an orbital maneuver to avoid the possible collision with this space debris. But if something wrong already happened, that will be depend. For instance, if one of our module is hit by the space debris and some leakage happened, these kind of things already happened in the Mir space station before. So even we will shut down the whole module and isolate it from the other modules. So these things do happen in the Mir space station before. And this is the most serious problem. And even in this case, we may require the astronaut to have an emergency escape from the station to go back to the Earth.
I mean, let's give time for one last question. Chris Lemba wants to know why they're called the taikonauts. Why Chinese astronauts are called taikonauts? I mean, don't Russian astronauts get their name also?
Of course, this comes from the culture. You see that usually in America they call them astronauts, but in Russia and the former Soviet Union they were called cosmonauts. So of course, in China, we have our own traditional, in Chinese name, is taikonauts. Because the universe in different countries have different pronunciations. In the United States, is the astro, and in Russia is cosmos. Well, in China is taikong. I believe that
is the outer space, literally. So I think this is really also a contribution to the English dictionary or foreign language dictionary at large. With the taikonauts.
Yes.
I think they have taikonaut as a word in dictionary.
It's already.
Let's hear from the commander.
Okay, T-minus 5 minutes and coming.
T-minus 5 minutes. We're 5 minutes away from the ignition. Professor Liu, I do want to bring you here and talk a little bit about international cooperation, because China has invited astronauts from all over the world to cooperate and participate in its future space station missions, of course, through a selection process. I mean, what does that say about China's commitment for its manned space program to be open, to be cooperative, and to be inviting, where all of its fruits, if you will, all of its achievements will be shared with the international community? Professor Liu.
Well, first, China does really agree with the first treaty of the United Nations that we are not really claiming territorial space in the outer universe. And that has really received popularity on the value-based one. And of course, technically, because Chinese space is getting more reliable, and we can also see through generations of improvements. And we are really talking about the 3-bedroom and 2 sitting rooms of apartment in the outer space, so that can really accommodate the scientific research in a more comfortable fashion. And the other is that China provides the more of the open attitude to have more inclusivity and to support the bi-policy, particularly the developing countries also to participate. And we are also ready to share the data for scientific use, etc. So this is really the attractiveness of the Chinese for more of the scientific engagement, not only in the space, but also on the ground.
Well, if you're watching us through our social media platforms, keep those questions and comments coming. When we have time, we will put your question to my studio guests here. We're 2 minutes away from ignition. Very quickly, Professor Yang, John Titter asked a simple question. Can we see Earth from a geostationary orbit in the visible spectrum?
Seriously speaking, yes. But you know that there is no any geostationary orbit manned missions before and today, because it's not necessary. You see that to send a human onto the geostationary orbit, the energy required is also almost equal to that to a human lunar mission. So that will use a very huge launch vehicle, but it's really not necessary. Why to do that? There is no reason to do this.
I mean, it's an imaginary question. That's part of why we have space programs. They really broaden people's horizons and open their eyes to a bigger world. We are just over.
Oh, there are so many audience for the launch.
Absolutely. To the ignition time, everyone is watching with breath that is bated, including all three of us here in the studio.
You may notice that the service arms are still attached to the launch vehicle. So after we change the power supply from the ground to the internal batteries, we will detach the rotational arms. And also we mount some cameras on these arms. We can also monitor the whole procedure to ensure safety. Actually speaking, this belongs to the launch side system. And before this launch, all these things must be operated to check whether if everything, for instance, the motors for the rotating is okay.
T-minus 1 minute. Do you think the Shenzhou well, you mentioned the Shenzhou 16 crew could be watching all of this
through
in the space
video
station
uploaded to the from the via the.
But they're not able to talk to them,
Tianlian.
right? They're not be able to give them a just a pep talk to encourage them or anything like that.
That then what they will send to them.
Okay.
No, already launched all the detachment of the arms.
Okay, the arms are detached.
Yeah.
Oh, you can see
30 seconds.
in the station. They are watching.
Well, we just saw some banners. Welcome. 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Professor Liu is getting nervous. I can feel that. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Over the past 2 decades, since China sent its first Taikonaut,
青山 USB 雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常。
11 manned missions. This is the 12th mission, carrying the youngest ever Shenzhou crew since the construction of China's space station.
So this vehicle comes from the camera, what I mentioned, mounted on the second stage of the rocket and looking backwards, so we can see the 2 boosters.
These cameras are so important. They bring us a real-time scenario, real-time monitoring of what is going on with the rocket to see its trajectory and to really visualize how that flight is going. I think it's super important.
So I believe at this moment you can see the direction has already changed. So the pitch over has already been successfully conducted, and the next critical step will be the jettisoning of the emergency escape tower.
And how much further into the flight will that happen? The jettisoning of the escape tower?
Escape tower. About 100 seconds also.
100 seconds. That's about 1 minute 40 seconds into the flight. We could see the separation, the jettisoning of the emergency escape tower.
This, I believe at this moment it's already supersonic and already past what we call the max Q, which means the maximum aerodynamic forces to the launch vehicle.
I mean, this is something the Taikonauts would have experienced in their training also.
Okay, jettisoned.
Okay, the escape tower has now been jettisoned.
And the next critical step will be the separation of the 4 boosters. About 2 minutes.
About 2 minutes into the flight, we will see boosters come off.
We also heard voice that all the ground stations tracking very normally, either the optical telescopes and the radars.
I love hearing them. I love hearing them report that everything is going on smoothly, normally. They have a very calming, very soothing voice.
Great.
The boosters have come off.
4 boosters. Oh, and also the first stage is separated.
The first stage has been separated.
Yeah. We have a camera on the rear part of the second stage to monitor the working of the main engine of the second stage. We have 1 main engine with a thrust about 80 tons, and also 4 vernier engines to change the attitude of the launch vehicle. So we can see the optical images based on the ground telescope. This is what I mentioned, the video from the camera mounted on the rear part of the second stage. We can see the big thrust is the main engine, and this is the engine mounted inside the payload fairing. So the next step will be the separation of the payload fairings.
The separation of the payload fairing will be
great.
Yes, that's
separated.
Separation.
Okay.
Now it's in the sunlight. The astronauts inside the cabin can see the sunlight through the 2 windows.
I mean, some of their predecessors used to, play with pens once they reach zero gravity.
And
so
the next step, after several minutes, will be the shutdown of the main engine. But still, the 4 vernier engine will be still continue working to adjust it, to make sure that it's precise enough.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that the taikonauts are doing fine. They seem to be doing okay in their seats.
That's the Shenzhou 617 flying eastwards. Along its trajectory, we have the Weinan, exactly.
Yeah.
Weinan ground station in Shanxi province, and also we have the Taiyuan Satellite Launch Center. We also have a ground station.
So this stage will probably take a little bit longer.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can see the background is the horizon of the Earth, very bright. They're already outside the atmosphere.
I mean, all of these cameras, they withstand such high temperature. They work magic.
Well, that still there is a interval between the camera and the rocket engine, so it's not in a very high temperature, still very safe.
Okay.
And you can see the small vernier engines just on the left. So that vernier engine is used to change the attitude of the this second
Got
stage.
it. Look at the Shenzhou 16 crew watching from the space station.
With the continuous working of the rocket engines, because the propellants are become less and less, and the acceleration will be greater and greater, so they will feel the G-forces acting to their body are increasing at this moment.
So this is what they're going through at this point in the flight.
Okay, Qingdao station has already captured the flying object. Qingdao is the last ground station to track the combination.
Okay, so this is the part where the taikonauts could feel a little bit more discomfort in their seats.
But it's already better than in the atmosphere. You see that in the atmosphere, because the international, you can see the 3D animation. We can see the links between the ground stations and the launch vehicle. There are multiple ground stations have tracking the launch vehicle, and all of them are receiving the telemetry date, which presents the current status of the launch vehicle. So we can have a 3D animation, although it is an animation, but it represents the real status of the flying objects.
You were saying, Professor, that at this point the taikonauts are feeling a little bit better than
experience the G-forces and also the vibration. You can see that the main engine is still working, but the next step will be the shutdown of the main engine. Now 7 minutes have passed. Usually the shutdown will happen about 8 to 9 minutes.
Yeah, on the right bottom corner, the Shenzhou 16 crew
is watching, as I mentioned.
The Shenzhou 17 crew, I mean, they must be very happy to welcome the Shenzhou 17 crew, because this will mean that their mission, their 6-month-long mission, will soon come to an end. They return to Earth on October 30th, and there will be that happy meeting, happy handover.
They will welcome their new colleagues after 6 or 7 hours.
With open arms, I'm sure. So in 6.5 hours or so, the spacecraft will conduct an automatic run to
the main engine is shut down.
The main engine has now shut down.
This means that the Shenzhou spaceship is already in orbit, but we will adjust its trajectory with the 4 vernier engines to make it more precise.
It is the minute that leave the ground that the astronauts will feel more uncomfortable. Right now it's getting more stabilized.
Exactly, because the main engine has shut down, there is no greater G-forces acting on their body.
It's not, when we sit in the vehicles or the airplane, it's really acceleration.
Yeah.
That is having a big stress on us.
So
they take off and landing.
Right.
So the next critical step will be the shutdown of the 4 vernier engines. And at this moment, as Professor Liu has mentioned, they will experience the 0G.
Right.
And with this camera mounted on the second stage, looking forward, it will monitor the separation of the Shenzhou spaceship.
It will monitor the separation of the Shenzhou space spacecraft from the carrier rocket.
Yeah. So just on the previous video, we can see still we have the communication link between the Qingdao station and the launch vehicle.
And Qingdao being the last ground station.
Yeah. So the separating point is just above the Pacific Ocean, very close to the eastern coast of China. Actually speaking, near the Shandong province and Jiangsu province.
长江6号发现目标。
Tiangong 6号 is the what we call the Yuanwang 6 space tracking ship of China. So it is now in the Pacific Ocean to be the last one to support the launch.
How many of these tracking ships do we have for this mission? Do we know that?
It depends.
游击关机，船舰分离。
Okay, this is a key moment. The spacecraft has separated from the carrier rocket. Professor Yang, does that mean that Shenzhou 17 is now in its predetermined orbit?
We will have some checking whether the orbital parameters is accurate enough. Only in these circumstances we can announce it is a successful launch. Moreover, there is also another two important steps. One is to that's the unfolding of the solar panels, and also the deployment of the hanging antenna to the data relay satellite.
天路发现目标，宽坡数。
So there you can see on the left is the Shenzhou 17 crew, right the Shenzhou 16 crew.
Yeah, they are watching the coverage.
Obviously, they're watching the coverage. They're watching what the Shenzhou 17 crew are faring, how they're doing, and they will meet each other in about 6.5 hours aboard the Tiangong space station.
So our Shenzhou 17 crew has already, all these three crew members have already entered the club of astronauts.
Absolutely, and they're flipping, look, the pens are floating again.
Yeah.
They're flipping through that handbook
They are just
again.
enjoying the zero-G.
They're now able to enjoy after the more dangerous, the more risky
so,
part of
look,
the flight.
This is a video comes from the camera mounted on the propulsion module of our Shenzhou spaceship. So it can monitor the unfolding process of the solar panels.
Look at our beautiful blue planet.
Just above the Pacific Ocean.
Just above the Pacific Ocean.
The propulsion module will conduct several orbit maneuvers to chase its target, the Tiangong space station, and to accomplish the rendezvous and docking. It will work all automatically.
Professor Yang, they don't have to do anything, right, at this point, but they're flipping through the handbook. What does that tell us?
No, they are actually speaking, the three astronauts has very important role to monitor everything. So
how do they monitor from
check?
Inside
there were instruments and there are echoes of every parameter. Great.
Okay, those are their solar panels, right?
Yeah, unfolded.
Okay, the solar panels on the spacecraft have just unfolded, which indicates, well, primitive success of the launch.
Yes.
That's
we on the propulsion module we have two solar wings and each have 4 panels.
We're hearing that the solar panels have deployed.
The previous voice comes from the astronauts because, as I mentioned, there are instruments to provide them all the critical parameters.
So they're able to see that the solar panels have deployed normally.
Not to see with their eyes, but to see in the instruments, the data.
The data. So they were reporting back to their ground colleagues that based on the data they see in the instruments, the solar panels are working.
The SADA, or the solar array drive assembly, also work normal.
I think after they get out of the sight of the detection on the ground station, the astronauts will play a more active role in reporting data.
Don't worry. Just 2 minutes before, there is a voice mentioned that Tianlu connected, which means that the data link between our Shenzhou spaceship and Tianlian data relay satellite has already connected. So there will be a continuous connection.
Right, and civilians also. Yeah, right.
Gentlemen, we are being watched by a lot of social media users. This exciting blast off is being live streamed on CGTN's YouTube channel. Many users are expressing their excitement in the comment section. Let me read a few. John Titori says, wish everyone luck in space adventure, not just China. Any success for humanity is good. John, I agree with you. I think my guests agree with you also. And Han Tua says, we come in peace to the creatures and life in outer space, charity for all, and malice towards none. Well, if there is aliens and outer space life forms, they'd be very happy to hear that. I guess so. And Cam35MM says, humans are still in the primitive aspect of space travel. Chemical energy is used to get us out from Earth's gravity. Then it's about momentum and vector to meet our And we're hearing from the Beijing Aerospace Control Center?
Yeah. And also some communication with the astronauts. Now you can see that they will open their face masks because it's already in orbit and very, very safe, not necessary to be closed by the face mask.
I mean, Professor Liu here, just the comments that I read to our viewers now, some of them mentioning that the purpose about space development is it's not about one country, it's not about just individual countries, it's for the greater good of the humanity. I do want to get your take and your thoughts, Professor Liu, on how China can make good on its promises to benefit the international community with whatever it finds with its manned space programs.
Well, technological advancement is really the precondition for us to reach there, however promise we can really deliver. And the other is really the economic prowess. Because without really economic support, you don't get the right type of supply and you don't really motivate people, particularly on the commercial use of all that stuff. And third is what can be the deliverable from the outer space exploration, and do they really bring back substantial stuff for scientific research and also for possibly the commercial use of it. So this is something that China has really delivered so far, and that really brings the excitement.
That it's in orbit.
The commander in Beijing Flight Control Center just announced the orbital parameters of our Shenzhou spaceship. It's in a very good condition, and this is a good start for the rendezvous and docking procedure to our Tiangong space station.
Okay.
And it will connect to the front docking port of Tiangong space station.
Got it.
Because at this moment, the bottom docking port is attached to the Shenzhou 16 spaceship.
When we talk about international collaboration, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Professor Liu. What does that look like? The participation of foreign astronauts, that's what we can think of. But could international collaboration also include other aspects?
Well, in the initial phase, actually, simply the satisfaction of the people's curiosity and guesswork is something that's very useful by exploring the unknown.
Professors, let's hear from
officials, experts, and comrades. Based on the flight data and report from Beijing Command and Control Center, the Long March 2 FY-17 carrier rocket has sent Shenzhou 17 manned spacecraft to the preset orbit. The solar panels have been unfolded successfully and are functioning well. I declare the launch of Shenzhou 17 mission a complete success. Thank you.
A complete success. A round of applause from everyone here who has worked tirelessly.
That's quite a relief.
What a sigh of relief for everyone.
Right, for everyone that is involved.